The chandeliers were too bright, the air too warm with perfume and applause. Lydia Cole stood on stage at the Rise Initiative's donor gala, gold microphone in hand, thanking everyone who made this success possible. She read from the speech I'd written, word for word, except for one missing line, my name. I stood 3 tables back, still holding the backup copy. When she smiled and said, "This organization is my life's work," my stomach turned. Every clap sounded like laughter in my face. The crystal glasses clinked around me like tiny bells celebrating a funeral I was forced to attend. Lydia's dress sparkled under the lights, her smile perfect and practiced. She looked like a success. She looked like a leader. She looked like everything I'd helped her become while I stood in shadows she deliberately cast. A photographer snapped her picture. She posed without hesitation, one hand on her hip, the other still gripping that golden microphone like a scepter. My throat tightened. I'd spent 3 weeks on that speech, refining every word, every pause, every emotional beat designed to open donor wallets. And she delivered it flawlessly, as if the words had sprung fully formed from her own brilliant mind. A board member leaned toward me. "You must be so proud, Talia." I nodded, mouth dry. Lydia's eyes flicked my way, quick and sharp, not guilty, not grateful, calculating. Then she looked past me as if I were part of the furniture. That's when it clicked. This wasn't an accident. It was a performance, and I was the prop. The board member continued talking, something about how lucky Lydia was to have such dedicated staff. Staff, not a partner, not an architect. Staff, like I handed out name tags and ordered catering instead of writing every grant that funded this place. My fingers went numb around my wine glass. The room suddenly felt smaller, hotter, like the walls were closing in while everyone else smiled and nodded and celebrated a woman who'd erased me from my own work. Lydia laughed at something someone said. That bright musical laugh she'd perfected for donors. I used to admire that laugh. Now it sounded like nails on a chalkboard, sharp and grating and fake. She was performing, and she was good at it. Years of practice had made her excellent at pretending. My name is Talia Grant. I'm 34 years old, and for 7 years I've worked at the Rise Initiative, a nonprofit helping women rebuild after incarceration. I joined at 27 when I still believed purpose mattered more than power. I wrote the grants, met the donors, managed crises, and held the place together while Lydia Cole collected credit like trophies. She once called me her anchor. I didn't realize anchors sink too. When I started, the Rise Initiative was 3 people in a borrowed office space with 1 program and a dream. Now we had 42 staff members, 6 locations, and an annual budget of $8 million. I knew every number because I'd written them. I knew every donor because I'd cultivated them. I knew every program because I'd designed them. Lydia knew how to smile for cameras and remember names at cocktail parties. That was her gift. Mine was making things work. Hers was making things look good. For 7 years, I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something meaningful together. I thought wrong. I slipped out during the applause, locked myself in a bathroom stall, and stared at my reflection in the small mirror I kept in my purse. Mascara streaks, eyes hollow. "Never again," I whispered. My voice shook, but the decision didn't. I could hear the muffled sounds of the gala continuing without me. More applause, more laughter, more celebration of Lydia's genius. I pressed my palms against my cheeks, trying to cool the burning anger that had settled there. 7 years. I'd given this place 7 years of my life. Late nights writing grants, early mornings meeting donors, weekends strategizing programs while Lydia posted vacation photos from Cancun. And this was how it ended, with my name missing from a speech I'd written, with board members patting me on the head like a good little helper. I dried my eyes, fixed my makeup, and took a deep breath. When I walked out of that bathroom, I wasn't the same person who'd walked in. Something had shifted, something cold and clear and final. The Talia who'd walked in still believed in loyalty, in patience, in waiting for recognition. The Talia who walked out knew better. Monday, Lydia breezed in late, latte in hand. "The gala was a hit," she said. "You make me look good, Talia." I smiled back. "That's my job." It wasn't a compliment anymore. It was a warning. She didn't catch the edge in my voice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She settled into her chair, kicked off her heels, and started scrolling through her phone, probably reading the glowing coverage from the gala. Local news had run a feature. The headline called her a visionary leader transforming lives. My desk faced hers through a glass partition. I watched her smile at her screen, watched her screenshot something, probably to post on her personal Instagram later. She did that a lot, turned our work into her brand. Every success became a Lydia Cole moment. Every milestone became proof of her vision. I turned back to my computer and opened my email. 43 unread messages. Grant reports due, donor follow-ups, program evaluations, the real work of running a nonprofit. The work Lydia never saw because she was too busy being the face of it. The work that actually mattered. I started noticing everything. Unapproved expenses, missing receipts, Lydia's signature on grant reports she hadn't touched. I kept my face calm, my tone polite, but my mind started cataloging. Tuesday, I found a travel expense for a conference Lydia never attended. The receipts showed a spa weekend instead. Wednesday, I discovered she'd signed off on a program evaluation I'd written, submitting it under her name to the board. Thursday, 3 donor thank you letters went out with her signature, letters I'd drafted and she'd never read. I didn't say anything, not yet. I just started saving files, screenshots, PDFs, email chains. I created a folder buried 3 layers deep in my personal drive and named it something boring. Q4 MISC files. The kind of thing no one would ever click on. Every transaction, every discrepancy, every little lie, I documented it all. Dates, amounts, descriptions. I built a timeline of Lydia's deceptions like I was building a legal case. Because maybe I was. Maybe I'd been building it for years without realizing it. Maybe this was always where we were headed and I'd just been too naive to see it coming. At lunch, Harper from accounting whispered, "Something's off in the travel reports." I leaned in. "Keep everything, don't delete a thing." That night, I made a folder on my laptop. LC Finance Audit. Harper was the only person at the Rise initiative who seemed to notice what I noticed. She was quiet, methodical, the kind of person who actually read the fine print. We'd become friends over shared suspicions and knowing glances across conference tables when Lydia's numbers didn't add up. "She submitted expenses for a Denver conference," Harper said, keeping her voice low even though we were alone in the break room. "But the conference was virtual this year." I checked. I nodded slowly. "Send me the documentation, all of it." Harper hesitated. "Talia, if this goes wrong." "It won't," I said. "Trust me." That night I stayed late. The office was empty, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic outside. I opened Harper's files and started cross-referencing. 3 months of questionable expenses. Hotel rooms during site visits that never happened. Dinners charged to the nonprofit card at restaurants nowhere near our locations. Lydia wasn't just taking credit. She was taking money. Emails, PDFs, screenshots. Every file had a timestamp. It wasn't revenge yet. It was self-defense. Proof that my work, my ethics, still existed somewhere. I organized everything chronologically. Created a master spreadsheet with dates, descriptions, amounts, and supporting documentation. Color-coded it. Green for verified legitimate expenses, yellow for questionable ones, red for outright fraud. By the time I finished, the spreadsheet was more red than green. My hands shook as I saved the file. This wasn't just about the gala anymore. This wasn't just about my name missing from a speech. This was about an organization I'd built being systematically looted by the person who was supposed to protect it. The women we served, women who'd lost everything, who were trying to rebuild from nothing, they deserved better than this. They deserved a leader who actually cared about the mission instead of treating it like a personal ATM and resume builder. I backed up the files to 3 different locations, my personal cloud, an encrypted flash drive, and a hard copy I sealed in an envelope. Then I went home and slept better than I had in weeks, because for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't carrying Lydia's secrets alone. I was building something that would matter. Lydia hosted a private lunch with donors. She pitched a new women's employment program. It was my design, my months of research. When a donor said, "Brilliant concept," Lydia smiled. "Came to me on a flight last week." I felt my jaw lock. The glass stem in my hand nearly snapped. We were at Bella Vista, the expensive Italian place Lydia loved because it made her feel important. 4 major donors sat around the table, the kind of people who could write 6-figure checks without blinking. I'd prepared briefing notes for Lydia the night before, including talking points about the employment program I'd been developing for 6 months. She was supposed to introduce me as the program architect. That was the plan. Instead, she launched into the presentation herself, describing my research as if it were her own revelation. She even used the phrase I'd coined, "dignity through employment." The donors ate it up. They always did. Lydia knew how to sell vision. She just never bothered to credit whose vision she was selling. One donor turned to me. "And what's your role in this, Talia?" Before I could answer, Lydia jumped in. "Talia handles implementation, the day-to-day details. She's wonderful at execution." I remembered my first day, her handshake, her warmth. "We'll build something meaningful together," she'd said. I'd believed her. Maybe that's what hurt the most, that I once admired her. 7 years ago, Lydia had seemed different. Passionate, driven, genuinely committed to helping women who'd been incarcerated. She talked about her own sister, who'd served time for drug possession, who'd struggled to find work afterward. "Nobody should have to fight that hard just to survive," Lydia had said, tears in her eyes. "We're going to change that." I'd been so inspired, so ready to fight alongside her. I'd worked 80-hour weeks that first year, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and purpose. Together, we'd secured our first major grant. Together, we'd launched our flagship program. Together, we'd celebrated our first success story, a woman named Keisha who got a job at a bank after completing our training. But somewhere along the way, together had become Lydia and her team had become her assistant. And I'd been too busy keeping everything running to notice when exactly I'd stopped being a partner and started being a prop. The shift had been gradual, almost invisible, until suddenly it was complete. Weeks passed. Lydia got bolder. She changed project names, erased shared drives, accidentally lost reports. I let her think I didn't notice. The employment program became Lydia's Employment Initiative. My grant proposal for expanded services disappeared from the shared folder, only to resurface a week later with her name as primary author. She started scheduling donor calls without including me, then asking me to send her my notes afterward so she'd know what to say. I played along. Smiled, nodded, took detailed notes at every meeting, but I also kept my own records. Every changed project name, every erased file, every stolen idea. I documented it all with timestamps and screenshots. The folder on my laptop grew thicker every week. Harper noticed what I was doing. "You're building a case," she said one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm protecting myself," I corrected. But she was right. I was building something. Something that would matter when the time came. Something that would speak louder than Lydia's charm and connections and carefully constructed image. I was building truth, one document at a time. At a networking event, I re-met Mara Linton, an investigative reporter. We shared coffee the next day. I didn't say much, just enough. She smiled. "If you ever want to talk off record, call me." Mara had covered the Rise initiative 2 years ago, a feel-good piece about our impact. She'd interviewed Lydia, of course, but she'd also spent time with our clients and staff. She'd seemed genuinely interested in the real work, not just the polished version Lydia presented. Over coffee, she asked how things were going. I kept my answer vague. "Good, busy, growing." But something in my voice must have tipped her off. She leaned forward slightly. "You know, Talia, I've covered a lot of nonprofits. The ones that shine brightest on the outside aren't always the healthiest on the inside." I took a sip of my latte. "That's true for a lot of organizations. If you ever want to talk," she said, sliding her card across the table, "about anything, off the record, deep background, whatever you need, I'm here." I pocketed the card. Didn't plan to use it, not yet, but it felt good to know I had an option. A safety valve if things got worse. They were about to get much worse. Lydia was nominated for Humanitarian of the Year. She asked me to draft her acceptance speech. "Make it sound humble," she said, "but powerful." I wrote it so carefully it almost read like a confession. The nomination came from the State Nonprofit Council, a prestigious recognition given to one leader each year. Lydia was ecstatic. She'd been chasing this award for 3 years. Now she finally had it. "I need you to write something incredible," she told me, her eyes shining with ambition. "Something that makes people cry, something that reminds them why this work matters." I spent a week on that speech. Every word was deliberate. Every sentence is designed to highlight the work of the Rise initiative while subtly emphasizing words like team effort, collaborative vision, and built together. I wove in statistics I'd researched and stories from programs I'd designed. I made it beautiful and true and devastating in its honesty. When I handed it to Lydia, she skimmed it quickly. "Perfect," she said. "This is exactly what I needed." She didn't notice the trap I'd laid, how every claim she'd make in that speech could be fact-checked, how every program she'd take credit for had a paper trail leading back to me. "Perfect," Lydia said, scanning my words. I smiled. "Glad you like it." The best lies are the ones that sound like truth, and this one was going to echo for weeks. The awards ceremony was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Black tie affair, 200 people, live streamed to the nonprofit community statewide. Lydia was already planning her outfit, her hair, her photo ops. She'd hired a professional photographer to follow her around the event. She practiced the speech in her office, reading it aloud while I sat across from her making adjustments. Really, I was memorizing every word, every pause, every place where she'd claim ownership of something she didn't create. "This part about the employment program," she said, pointing to a paragraph. "Maybe emphasize the innovation more. I want people to understand how groundbreaking this is." "Absolutely," I said. "I'll make it even stronger." That night, I rewrote that section to include even more specific details. Details that only the actual creator of the program would know. Details that would matter when someone eventually checked. Details that would become evidence when the truth finally came out. I was building a monument to her lies, one carefully crafted sentence at a time. I printed every file, sealed them in an envelope, and left it with my lawyer, to be opened if anything happens to me or my reputation. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. My lawyer, Simone, had handled my will and power of attorney years ago. We weren't close, but she was professional and discreet. I called her office and scheduled an appointment, telling her assistant I needed to discuss document storage. In her conference room, I laid out the situation carefully. Not emotional, just factual. "I work for a nonprofit. There are financial irregularities. I've documented everything. If something happens, if I'm suddenly fired or my reputation is attacked, I need this information protected and accessible." Simone listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "This is witness protection for documents." "Exactly." She took the envelope, logged it into her system, and locked it in her office safe. "If anything happens, I'll know what to do." I left her office feeling lighter. The evidence existed outside my control now. Lydia couldn't delete it, couldn't erase it, couldn't make it disappear like she'd made my contributions disappear. It was real, documented, and protected. That mattered. A junior coordinator was fired for budget errors. She cried as she packed her things. I knew the truth. Lydia had ordered those expenses herself. That was the last straw. Her name was Keisha, the same Keisha who'd been our first success story, who'd gone to banking school and gotten hired, who'd come back to work for us because she wanted to help other women like herself. She'd been with us for 3 years, hard worker, honest, kind. Lydia called her into the office on a Wednesday afternoon. 20 minutes later, Keisha emerged with red eyes and a box of her belongings. "Budget discrepancies," she told me, her voice shaking. "Lydia says I authorized expenses that weren't approved, but I didn't. I swear I didn't." I believed her, because I'd seen those expenses. They were from Lydia's corporate card, reclassified under Keisha's department code. Someone had changed the records, and I knew exactly who. I helped Keisha carry her box to her car. "I'm sorry this happened," I said. "I needed this job," she whispered. "I have kids. How am I supposed to explain to my parole officer that I got fired for stealing when I didn't steal anything?" I watched her drive away, and something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about me anymore. At midnight, an email landed in my inbox. Lydia accidentally copied me on a donor update full of false numbers. I saved it, printed it, and deleted the trace. That was the thread I needed to pull. The email was meant for the board chair, probably sent in haste. It outlined our Q3 outcomes, but the numbers were inflated. Programs we'd served 50 clients through were listed as 75. Expenses that had run over budget were reported as on target. Employment placement rates that hovered around 60% were claimed as 85. I cross-referenced everything against the real data. Harper's financial reports. My program evaluations. Client tracking databases. Every single number in Lydia's email was wrong. Not accidentally wrong. Deliberately, strategically wrong. She was lying to the board. Probably had been for years. And if the board didn't know the truth, that meant donors didn't either, which meant every dollar they'd given had been based on false promises and fabricated success. I forwarded the email to my personal account, saved the real data alongside it, and added it all to my growing file. Then I deleted any trace that I'd received the email. If Lydia realized her mistake, she'd panic and try to cover it up. I drafted my resignation letter. No anger, no accusations, just calm professionalism. Then I sent Mara the full file, anonymously with one line, "Follow the money." I spent an entire Sunday crafting that resignation letter, kept it simple. thanked Lydia for the opportunity, expressed gratitude for 7 years of meaningful work, gave 2 weeks' notice, offered to help with the transition. Professional, gracious, boring, no mention of fraud, no mention of credit stealing. No mention of Keisha or the falsified board reports or any of the dozens of other ethical violations I documented. Just a polite, unremarkable letter that would give me a clean exit. Then I created an anonymous email account. Took every file from my LC Finance audit folder, compressed it into a single encrypted file, and sent it to Mara with a brief note. The RISE initiative has been misrepresenting its finances and outcomes to donors and the board. This file contains evidence. Follow the money. More information to come. I sent it at 3 a.m. from a coffee shop across town, using their public Wi-Fi. Then I went home, climbed into bed, and slept like the dead. The weight I'd been carrying for 7 years was finally lifting. It was done. 2 days later, the headline hit. The charity that lied to its donors. Within hours, donors froze funding. The board called an emergency session. By then, I was already gone. Mara worked fast. By Tuesday morning, her article was published in the State Journal, the major paper that covered nonprofit accountability. The headline alone was devastating, but the details were worse. She'd verified everything. Cross-referenced my documents with public tax filings, interviewed former staff members who confirmed the pattern, even got quotes from donors who felt betrayed. Lydia's fabricated numbers were laid out in charts and graphs. The questionable expenses were listed line by line. The employment program I'd created was correctly attributed to senior staff, not executive leadership. My phone exploded with texts. Harper, oh my God. Bryce, did you see this? Former colleagues, is this real? I didn't respond. I was already in my car, driving away from the city, my resignation letter delivered to HR that morning before anyone arrived. Clean exit, just like I'd planned. I'd timed everything perfectly. By the time the chaos started, I was already 3 hours away, unreachable, unavailable, and completely at peace with my decision. Harper texted me updates, Lydia sweating under fluorescent lights, stammering through excuses. She said someone sabotaged her, Harper wrote. I smiled. She's half right. The emergency board meeting lasted 6 hours. Harper watched from the hallway, catching glimpses through the conference room windows. She sent me play-by-play updates like she was covering a sporting event. 11:47 a.m. Board chair is reading from printed copies of the article. Lydia is pale. 1:23 p.m. They brought in the auditor. Lydia's lawyer is here now. 3:15 p.m. Lydia just yelled something about betrayal. 2 board members walked out. 4:56 p.m. It's over. They're voting. I sat in a park 2 hours away, watching the texts roll in, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been personal, emotional, messy. This was consequences. This was justice delivered through the systems Lydia herself had taught me to navigate. She'd built her empire on my silence. I just decided to stop being silent. And without my silence propping everything up, the whole structure had collapsed like a house of cards in a strong wind. Beautiful, really, how fast it all fell. The award was revoked. The staff resigned. Lydia's name trended online, not for praise, but scandal. Everything she built on my silence collapsed the moment I stopped being quiet. By Friday, the Humanitarian of the Year nomination was officially withdrawn. The Nonprofit Council released a terse statement about maintaining the integrity of the recognition. Translation: they didn't want to be associated with fraud. 3 staff members quit in solidarity with Keisha, who Lydia had tried to scapegoat. 2 donors publicly pulled their funding and demanded audits. The State Attorney General's office opened an investigation into nonprofit financial misconduct. Lydia's carefully constructed image, the visionary leader, the humanitarian, the champion of second chances, shattered like glass. Social media was brutal. Former clients came forward with stories of programs that had been cut while Lydia maintained her expensive office and travel schedule. Journalists started digging into her past positions, finding similar patterns. I watched it all from a distance, my phone off, my conscience clear. Every piece of news confirmed what I'd known for years. Lydia Cole was a fraud. The only difference now was that everyone else knew it too. The truth had finally caught up with the lies. I registered my new foundation, True Rise. Smaller, transparent, honest. Former donors reached out one by one. "We trust you," they said. I slept for the first time in weeks. 3 weeks after my resignation, I filed paperwork to establish True Rise Initiative, a nonprofit focused on employment and reentry services for formerly incarcerated women. Same mission as the Rise Initiative. Different leadership structure, a working board, transparent finances, shared credit. I kept it small intentionally. No fancy office, no corporate credit cards, just me, a part-time assistant, and a commitment to doing things right. The first donor email arrived on a Tuesday. It was from one of the people who'd been at that lunch where Lydia stole credit for my employment program. "I've been following the news," she wrote. "I should have asked more questions. I'd like to support your new work. How can I help?" Then another, and another. By the end of the month, I had enough funding to launch properly. Not from guilt, I thought, from recognition. They finally saw what had been there all along. They finally saw me, not just the shadow I'd been standing in for 7 years. A month later, Lydia showed up at my new office. Her makeup was gone, her voice hoarse. "You did this to me," she said. I looked her straight in the eye. "No, Lydia, you did this to yourself. I just stopped hiding it." She left without another word. My new office was small, a converted storefront in a neighborhood most nonprofits avoided. But it was mine. I was there alone on a Saturday, organizing files, when I heard the knock. Lydia stood in the doorway, barely recognizable. No designer clothes, no perfect hair. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" I gestured to a folding chair. She sat but didn't speak for a long moment. "Why?" she finally asked. "After everything we built together." "We didn't build it together," I said quietly. "I built it, you took credit. I gave you a job, I gave you opportunities. You gave me work," I interrupted. "And then you erased my name from it. You fired Keisha to cover your fraud. You lied to donors, to the board, to everyone." She looked away. "The reporter, that was you." "That was you," I corrected. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." She stood, her hands shaking. "You'll fail without me." I smiled. "I've already succeeded. You just never noticed." Morning light spilled across my new desk. I read an email from a national donor. "We'd like to fund your expansion." I exhaled. "She taught me how to build influence," I said quietly. "She just never realized I was learning how to take it back." And with that, I hit send on a proposal under my own name for the first time in 7 years. The proposal was for a 3-state expansion. Employment services for 500 women annually. Partnerships with 20 employers. A model that could be replicated nationwide. Everything I'd dreamed of building but never could under Lydia's leadership. I attached my credentials. 7 years of experience, author of successful grant proposals totaling $12 million, architect of award-winning reentry programs. All true, all documented, all mine. The foundation officer who'd sent the initial inquiry replied within hours. "When can we schedule a site visit?" I looked around my small office, folding chairs, borrowed desks, walls that needed paint. It wasn't much, but it was honest. It was transparent. It was built on a foundation that wouldn't crumble the moment someone asked hard questions. Outside, I could hear the city waking up. Car horns, voices, life continues. Somewhere across town, the Rise Initiative was probably in another emergency board meeting. 3 months later, True Rise served its first client. Her name was Keisha. She walked into my office with tears in her eyes. "I heard what you did," she said. "I heard you're the one who sent that information to the reporter." I didn't confirm or deny it, just offered her a chair. "I want to help," she said. "However I can, this organization, what you're building, it's what the Rise Initiative was supposed to be." I hired her that day, made her director of client services. Put her name on the website, on our letterhead, on every document that left our office. She'd earned it. By month 6, we'd served 42 women, placed 31 in jobs, secured partnerships with 18 employers. The numbers were real, verified, honest. No inflation, no lies, just the truth of what we were actually accomplishing. A year after I left, the Rise Initiative shut its doors. The board couldn't recover from the scandal. Lydia's name became a cautionary tale in nonprofit circles, a reminder of what happens when ego overtakes mission. I didn't celebrate. I just kept working. One morning, I opened my laptop to find an M.